Behold the head of a traitor. We haven't got to the important part yet. So die all traitors. God save the king. There you go, rule royalists. Right now, the head was then been placed on a soldier's pike, paraded down through the streets of London, down to the old London Bridge. There, the head's been born in 20 would be tracked. The headless corpse that has been thrown on a car, wheeled back into the tower, and buried inside is the Chapel Royal of St. Peter at Edmonton. Spot ladies and gents is very close to where our tour finishes. Right, so very shortly we're going to move off from here. We're going to start making our way inside the tower, ladies and gents. We're actually going to follow the trail of that headless corpse. It made its final journey inside before being late. So, ladies and gentlemen, I invite you now to follow me to the outer ward of the Tower of London. Let's go. Right, okay then, ladies and gentlemen. Now we're now standing in the outer ward of the Tower of London. That is to say, we are in between two defensive walls. Now the inner wall behind me here is almost 50 feet high. The outer wall, the one that's behind you in places, is 30 feet thick. Now in between the two, if you look down this way, ladies and gentlemen, we've got Mint Street. So called because up until the year 1810, this is where all the coins of the realm and the empire were all designed and minted. Now, if you look at this row of buildings behind you, like I say, it was one part of the Royal Mint. Most of these buildings today have been converted into homes for my fellow Yeoman Water colleagues, the beefeaters, who live here at the tower with our families. Having said that though, that house directly behind you there, the one that's 2 stories high, that is number 2 Mint Street. Now, number 2 Mint Street used to be the home to the master of the Royal Mint. In the year 1696, a very famous gentleman lived in that house there as master of the Mint. That famous Englishman, Sir Isaac Newton, the man who invented that fantastic British invention of gravity. You're all floating around before that, you know. Right, over in the corner here, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a small, narrow archway. Now that's known as the Sally Port or the Royal Entrance. Now back in the day when London had little more than rough and uneven tracks, royalty, they preferred to cross by river. They would moor their royal barge up just the other side of that wall, cross over a small drawbridge, and they would make their entrance into the tower via that archway. Now, on the 29th of May, 1533, King Henry VIII was standing here. He was awaiting the arrival of his second wife, Anne Boleyn, who was being brought to the tower to prepare for her coronation. As Anne stepped into the archway over there, Henry, like the good husband he was, stepped forward, he embraced his new wife, he kissed her on both cheeks, and he promised to love her for the rest of her life. Now sadly for Queen Anne, her life was only to last another 3 more years. 3 years later, she was brought back to the tower via a different gateway and for very different reasons. I'll cover more of that story later on. Now behind me here, ladies and gentlemen, we have the Bell Tower, built in the reign of King Richard I or Richard the Lionheart. And called the Bell Tower because of a small belfry that sits on top. Now inside that belfry is the oldest dates of the year 1651, and it was rung as a warning. And when it was rung, the gates would be closed and the battlements and the defences would be manned. But it was also rung 1 hour before every execution. Now the bell tower is the oldest and strongest of 13 towers which make up the inner defensive wall, and it comprises of 2 chambers, one on top of the other. Now because of the nature of its construction, it's always been used to house really important prisoners. Now one such prisoner was a man by the name of James Scott, the Duke of Monmouth. He was the eldest of 13 illegitimate children fathered by King Charles II, and born whilst his father was in exile in Holland, trying to escape the clutches of Oliver Cromwell after the English Civil War. Now when Charles II died, he died without leaving an heir to the throne. The throne was passed to his younger brother, James, Duke of York. Now Monmouth insisted that his mother had married King Charles whilst they were in exile in Holland. If this were true, this meant that Monmouth was the legitimate heir to the throne. So in the year 1685, when James, Duke of York, was crowned King James II, Monmouth landed off the southern coast of England, and he raised an army of farmhands and labourers in what became known as the Pitchfork Rebellion. It ended with his army at the Battle of Sedgemoor in Somerset. His army was totally destroyed and routed. Now Monmouth, who was found hiding in a ditch a few days after the battle, got straight into the town, and in the space of 3 days was put on trial for high treason and sentenced to death. Now, on the day of his execution, which took place out on Tower Hill, his executioner was a giant of a man by the name of Jack Ketch. Now Jack Ketch, full-time butcher, part-time executioner, and most people believe a professional drunk. Now the day of the execution, Jack Ketch was so drunk he had to take 5 strokes of the axe to try and settle Monmouth's head. First, he missed his neck completely, embedded himself deep into Monmouth's shoulder. By the time he had taken the 5th blow, Monmouth's head was still attached to his body. In a fit of rage, Jack Ketch threw down his axe, he pulled out his butcher's knife, and he proceeded to cut off the remaining pieces of flesh and sinew which connected Monmouth's head to his body, before placing his head on a pike and taking it downriver to be put on display on London Bridge. Now meanwhile, back at the tower, somebody suddenly realised, hang on a minute, this is the son of a king who was executed, and up until that point of some belief, he'd never had his promise repaid. So one of the beefeaters was dispatched to the tower, sent downriver to London Bridge with orders to collect the head and told to bring it straight back here. It was then sewn back onto the body by the tower surgeon. And sadly, ladies and gentlemen, it was too late to save him. I am told that portrait's got a bit of a detached look about it. It now hangs in the National Portrait Gallery in Trafalgar Square, so you can go and take a look for yourselves. Right, now talking of beheading, let us now be heading off. Around the corner, the train escape